Right, and so with one fell swoop, we were live. So first of all, welcome everybody to the 8 p.m. live stream. It's the first one of the week because I decided to take yesterday off. I'd been away for a little weekend break. Oh gosh, did I just say that? The COVID police will come for me. But regardless, yes I was, and yes I'm back. And we have a really interesting hour lined up for you folks because we're going to talk about the good old media in general, the British media I suppose in particular, and their role in the whole COVID fear porn which emanates from every organ of that media. And I'm really pleased, I've got a brilliant guest coming on in a moment. So just before we bring him on, just a reminder, if you're watching this on Facebook or YouTube, share on Facebook, subscribe on YouTube, make sure you get that out there so that people can actually catch this if it's not watching it live. All our social media links are in the description below, so just go down there and you'll see all the links to the multiple sites, and give us a big thumbs up if you like it, and if you don't like it, you can give us a thumbs down as well, but up to you, it's your choice. So and also don't forget, very important final point, you know, this doesn't operate on fresh air, so if you go to altnewsmedia.net/donate, drop £1 or whatever it is into the hat, that's your that would be a good deed for you to do. So hope you do that. And I think that's us pretty much all sorted out. My guest I'm bringing on, David's been on the stream with me before, David Sedgwick, author of several brilliant books actually, but two in particular which we've discussed on the stream in times gone past. BBC, Brainwashing Britain, and the Fake News Factory. Couldn't be more appropriate actually to have David on the stream. So without any further ado, if we can just bring David on and just set it up. David, good evening.
Good evening, David. Nice to be here again.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. It's been a while, David. Of course, when I was cruelly struck down from Twitter in 2020, that was that caused me to lose track actually with some of my friends over on Twitter, and that was about the only thing I missed from Twitter, by the way, David. A more toxic sewer I couldn't imagine, but nonetheless, it is what it is. So look, you're very welcome. Thanks to all of those of joining. I see you on the stream there. I see we've got someone from Belgium, as exotic, David, as far away Brussels in Belgium. I wonder, is that from the centre of the European Union Parliament? Yeah. So listen. So folks, what I wanted to talk about really tonight, it's a perennial topic, and David and I have talked about this before. But look, the British media, in my view, has been a disgrace, David, for a very, very long time, in so many ways anyway. And your books have brilliantly exposed the BBC for what it is. And it's, I guess, one of the biggest news organisations in the world, certainly in the UK. So I thought they were bad, David. I thought they were bad. I thought they were pretty rotten. And then COVID came along. And in this age of COVID, the things that we've seen, and I'm going to put up a couple of images before we get into the conversation. Just stuff that they speak for themselves. This was, a couple of headlines from, I think it was a Daily Mirror or whatever. Terrifying mutant COVID strains from around the world, David, and ones you need to worry about. Get that? You need to worry about them. Cue the next one. Got a few of these lined up. Yeah, Matt Hancock praising the good old Sun readers, David, for volunteering in Jab's army campaign. So yet again, the government now and the Sun lockstep with each other. I think we've got another one. There's so many of these, David. It's actually so predictable. This is a good old Telegraph telling us that, oh gosh, an estimated 1 in 8 people in England have had COVID-19. New figures show. I'm telling you, David, it's a pandemic. It's a pandemic. Everyone's got it, and it's mutated. And then I think there was one last one. I just wanted to share. Oh well, yeah. we'll come on to that one. Just go back one there if we just go back one. Yeah, the good old BBC delivering the biggest education, David, in its history. The BBC's gonna educate our kids, and I mean, what could possibly go wrong with that one? We'll come on to that in a sec, David. And then I think we got the last one I wanted to, and this I think was a comment that was made tonight, actually. Like the most indefensible scaremongering tonight on BBC 6 o'clock news. No context whatsoever. But David, get this: the BBC are now live. You have to laugh, from a mortuary, and yeah, right, David. Let's start with that. Right, that's enough of this, right, David. Let's start with the BBC in the mortuary, because I'm not sure how we can top that. Over to you. Thoughts?
I plumbing you down. It's almost sign of brain. Yeah, they're not just reporting now creating wrong. You've got to believe this. And the amount of persuasion going on with conditioning. They've advocated the role of journalists. Now they are government propagandists, and that's entire mainstream media. So I think even more outrageous. I didn't know that they did live from a mortuary. I have to confess that came low. Things like it's indicative of just the role of the journalists. Worry. I don't think there's a media outlet out, including the Telegram. These kind of right, less liberal left. They joined in as well. You go to the Daily Mail or Function. I noticed they joined the bandwagon. Telegram wagon.
Yeah, David. Yeah, David. Actually, your sound is really poor. People can't hear you. I'm wondering, do you want to try and disconnect and reconnect to see if we can do that? And while that's happening, I'll just keep the conversation going. So sorry about that one, folks, but we're reliant on the joys of the internet. But anyway, yeah. So I hope you got that one. So the BBC, folks, were reporting live from a mortuary. I mean, what next? Live from the graveside. Live from the crematorium. Here's the BBC to tell you just how sad people are and just how awful COVID is. I think this is an absolute new low. So I think we get David back on the stream. So David, do you want to try again to see if we can actually hear you?
Can you hear me okay?
Just keep, okay, so talk a little bit and we'll see if it's coming through. If not, we may have to abandon it because people can't hear it.
Yeah, I can hear the vibration. Coming back at me.
Yeah. Now, I tell you, David, we're going to have to... Ooh. I could echo as well there. Right, this is a technological disaster we're having, so let's not worry. Let me just try something here, David. I need to... Okay, David, you just said something now.
Hello, hi. Oh, that's better. That's better. Much better. Can you hear me? I can't hear you.
Yes.
I can't hear you, but...
Okay, so you can hear me now, and the way we're going to do this to make it work is when I'm speaking, that's fine. When you're speaking, I'll be muted, so you just talk. Okay, right, folks. Forget the last 10 minutes to start it, right? Right, make sure you're sitting comfortably. Do not switch that dial. So listen, we started chatting there about the sheer appallingness of the BBC reporting from a mortuary, and David's written books about the BBC. Right, David, over to you.
Well, I was just saying that this the mainstream media are now not just reporting; they're leading. They're leading this whole. They're trying to make a drama out of a crisis. I think that's the cliche, isn't it? Because they've absolved any responsibility as journalists. And I think in those books I was writing before, I told my main argument is the BBC are not journalists; they're activists. And the really depressing thing is it's not just the BBC. I mean, if you look at newspapers like the Telegraph, for example, or the Sun, you might think that the Sun would be connecting to ordinary working class people a little bit better. The Telegraph's supposed to catering to the sort of centre right. They're all at it. They're all towing the government line. Why is that? What's happened to the media in this country? I think that we're at a terrible stage in this country when the actual media are now just parroting whatever government propaganda comes their way. There's not any kind. I can't detect any kind of skepticism with this COVID coronavirus, which makes me very, very suspicious that there is an agenda. How else could you say there isn't an agenda when actual professional people who call themselves professional journalists are not doing what journalists are supposed to do? And I think that leads us to a very, very dark place. And people keep making the connection to Orwell, which I do in my BBC books. And I think we are there where the state and the media are one and the same thing now, is what Orwell called the party. And we're at a stage now where we have the party, which consists of, the Twitter blue tick brigade, that sort of section of society, your celebrities, your academics, your establishment, in a sort of psychological war against the underclass, the proles, what George Orwell called the proles, the ordinary working class people, which is probably about 80% of it is probably the Pareto principle, the 80-20. We've got 80% who are working class, or ordinary people, and you have this 20% party who are propagandizing us on the behalf of the very, very rich and powerful 1%. The media are complicit. They're not doing their job, and it's highly, highly worrying to me, as it should be to everybody.
Yeah, I think for me, you've got to ask yourself the question: what's the probability that just about every journalist working for either a broadcaster or a newspaper or whatever organ of the media all arrive at the same conclusion? Well, what's the chances of that one then? And I would say it's a lot greater than me getting COVID-19 actually. So I think that the British media has sunk to a new depth, and that's why, David, I'm not actually surprised that they're actually reporting as tonight on the BBC News from a mortuary. As I said, a graveside as well, wherever. It appears if you work in the NHS and you Google an intensive care ward, you have to be careful you don't trip over a camera, because they're in there with their cameras as well. And as you say, it's like they've merged, and that's you summed it up really well there, actually, David. There's no, it's like the pigs look to the humans and the humans look to the pigs, and there's no difference.
Yeah, and it means that we can't rely on anybody anymore other than ourselves. That's the kind of fracture that's happening in society now, which really worries me profoundly. It's almost like there's a definite schism now between two sets of people. The sort of the technocracy, this 20% that I think is quite important, that Orwell saw many years ago, and ordinary people now who are being, if you dare step out of line, if you dare go to an alternative source of news, for example, I know Richie Allen. I've been on Richie Allen's show quite a lot, and he will platform doctors. I mean, these aren't cranks. These are doctors who the mainstream rejects simply because they don't accept the mainstream narrative, and that's getting narrower. And there's not many places that when I say we are, I mean just ordinary people who are not in this technocratic golden circle of received wisdom, let's say BBC wisdom, government wisdom. If you're not towing that line, you are now going to become almost demonized, a pariah. They're going to call you, for example, Trump voters are now terrorists. They're calling them terrorists in America. Well, we've been demonizing Brexit voters over here for the last 5 years. We know that, but now I see that getting even worse now. I think that ordinary working class people are now going to be completely marginalized without any sort of way to express their concerns. And that's what this technocracy wants. They want to take, I mean, we've seen the censorship happening, David, to yourself and other people. And that's this latest stage of this move towards complete disenfranchisement, I think, of ordinary people and ordinary voices, because ordinary people are completely disconnected from this 20%, this 20% elite, the what I call the inner party, what all call the inner party. We are completely disconnected from that. And worse than that is the fact they also want to completely silence the majority, the 80%. I said that in my book. I think one of the major objectives of the BBC is to make minority opinion seem like majority opinion, and also to make majority opinion seem like minority opinion. So they're sort of turning the world upside down. And all what we're seeing at the moment with the media, we're seeing this massive shift in the media right over to this, the Orwellian party. They're all part of the party. I don't know where we go from here, actually.
It's disturbing, isn't it, David? Because as you say, I mean, I stopped really listening to anything that the British media have had to say on COVID in particular for about 8 months now. I mean, probably from about April of last year, it seemed to me that there was something very strange going on, and it just got worse and worse. And that's why I've entitled this one, in my own way, "Is the mainstream media a virus?" You see, I think COVID-19 it's a serious illness, a serious disease, but the mainstream media is worse, because the mainstream media, I suggest, David, it's stripping away our ability to even communicate. You know, we have to communicate on channels like this, on Richie Allen's, and there's other platforms out there, I know, and that's almost where we have to retreat, because we're not allowed on the legacy media voices who question the COVID narrative or dismissed by the press as one of their favorite words, COVIDiots. Every apparently, if you show a degree of independent thought, you're a COVIDiot. What do you think of COVIDiots?
Yeah, this deliberate polarization. I think I've mentioned this before. It's a classic Marxist tactic, which to say if you are with us or you're against us. That's pure Marxism. It's either you buy this total COVID coronavirus deathly plague narrative 100%, and if you don't, if you express any kind of skepticism about how profound it is, how widespread it is, etc., how the measures taken to combat it, then you are on the opposite side. And that's a very, very dangerous place to be. What that means is there are eminent doctors and physicians and scientists who've expressed or have reservations, and they are instantly put onto you are in the deniers, you are in the pariahs, the deniers. These are professional people. And it's done deliberately to polarize that debate. So in the end, the idea is that you're in a sort of ideological cul-de-sac where you have to agree with them. There's no in-between, there's no grey area. And I think that's done deliberately. And what you're saying about the media before, David, the people in the media, I mean, I've known for a long time that once you enter into the media, especially a place like the BBC, you have to drop any kind of ethical or morality, because you have to go along with what they're saying. They are enjoying this, David. That's the thing about it. Journalists are absolutely enjoying the human misery, because let's face it, media is about misery. They love a tragedy, they love a disaster, and they're going to string this out for as long as possible. And we've got mortuaries, mass deaths, etc. They love it, and that's disturbing, because that media narrative and that media pleasure and enjoyment is driving government policy. And that's the real issue here, that I strongly suspect that Matt Hancock and Boris Johnson were terrified to go with herd immunity way back when this started, to do shielding, vitamin D, etc., hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, other drugs that have subsequently been proved to be very efficacious. They were terrified partly to go with that because they knew the media, just one death, the media could hang it on them and say, you caused that one death because you didn't lock down. And that's what the media, that's the power that these media executives hold over the government. And I think without that mainstream media, I think we've had a much more moderate and more successful approach. I don't think we'd be in full lockdowns. I think there'd have been other strategies would have been used to deal with this. I think the elderly and the vulnerable would have been shielded. I think the rest of it was about herd immunity, good nutrition, vitamin D, perhaps prophylactic treatments like hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin. And I don't think we'd be in this position. I don't think there would have been, allegedly, I still don't know whether there have been 60, 70,000 deaths. I still don't know about that because of the way they're recording these deaths. We all know there's problems with that. But I think the mainstream media, without them, I don't think we'd have the situation we're in right now. And I don't think the government would be responding in this knee-jerk fashion because it's being driven by zealot news editors in the mainstream media.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that also I find very disturbing is you're right to say the media love this. They absolutely love the pandemic. And by the way, it hasn't really been a pandemic since April of last year, but they've kept it going. And they love their second wave and they love the third wave. But one of the reasons, David, I suggest that they like it is that it generates lots of cash, lots of money for them. So, you've got lots of people now sitting at home because they've been furloughed or they've lost their jobs or whatever. And these people are sitting in front of the goggle box and they are consuming more media. The government then pays the likes of ITV and Sky to pump out the fear on the hour. Well, I'm going to say on the hour, every hour, but actually it's more frequent than that. Same if you tune into talk radio, which is sort of a semi bastion of sort of reasonableness, but not that much. And again, you get the ads. I mean, I can't listen to it for more than 15 minutes. And so what I'm saying is that isn't it fair to make the observation that the media actually financially profit from all of this, whilst other people lose their businesses?
Yeah, it used to be in newspaper sales. Now it's gone over to clicks and related to advertising revenue. In some ways, the media would argue that, well, we are only providing what the public want. That's always been the media argument, whether it's been intrusion into celebrity lives or stories about the royal family, that we're providing what you, the public, want to read. That's always the media. That's been the classic media defense. And I mean, they must be getting revenue, David. I mean, it's a bit odd. I'm talking to you about the media here, but I avoid the media like a plague. But because I'm on social media, I get excerpts and clips. For example, I've not had a BBC television license for 7 years. So I'm not really an expert to talk on. In some ways, I shouldn't really be talking about the BBC, but I get lots of excerpts and clips from other people and other sources. But I think I've made the conscious decision to cut myself off. We cut ourselves off in this house from mainstream media. We refuse to listen to it. But that's difficult for people because that's a hard habit to break. And it took myself and my wife a few years to decide to finally bin the television license. We've been talking about it for a few years. And the problem is that the media is such a pervasive part of culture and life and everyday experience. It takes a lot to dump it, to change the habit of a lifetime. So although people are very suspicious of the media, and I think people are becoming more informed, they're still addicted to what it produces. And if it produces scare stories, frightening stories, and of course the usual treacly sort of sentimental bits thrown in as well, the media is quite a crafty entity. It knows how to hook people. It knows how to get them coming back. It knows how to draw them in. The human interest stories, the stories of little doggies being rescued, and the very clever machine media. And I wonder how we'll ever break to the hold of the mainstream media. I think other than complete withdrawal, like myself, I don't know how people will ever escape it. But what I think is people need to get away from it. But what's the alternative? The alternative is do what I do, which is lots of independent research, sitting at home, spending a lot of time actually going to authentic original sources and getting my information there. How many people will do that? They want bite-sized information instantly given to them, delivered by Piers Morgan or some terrible individual like that. What's the alternative? What are people going to do? How are we going to this is a war. You know, the MSM is at war against, I think, the vast majority of people. But it's a war that is going to be very difficult to win. I don't know how we overcome this MSM. What do we do?
I see the comment, David. Jameson here says, Piers Morgan should be in a padded cell. Dangerous propagandist. It was actually one of my lasting achievements on Twitter that he blocked me way back. Even before he went completely doolally in his COVID fear-mongery that he engages in. But you know, you're right. And actually, let's just ask the stream, as we've got people on here, as we're chatting, folks. David has said that he is basically turned away entirely from the mainstream media. I have to say, I have turned away from it 95%. Because of this, I do have to I like to keep up to date in what they do. I hate every second of it, David. I find it demoralizing. I find it it's offsetting. It's not helpful. It just brings you down, and it does. And so, but millions of Brits are turning the dial. You know, they're switching on. They're sitting down with their McDonald's takeaway in front of them, and they're just gorging on, you know, the absolute crap that the BBC in particular produces. Although, mind you, Sky are no better. Sky are just as bad in my book as the BBC. It's always like that, but it is now. But then, change of ownership.
Yes, and that's the issue. I understand that, because we've been weaned and brought up on this stuff. It's a big decision to make. But you know something, Dave? I think as far as mental health is concerned, it's a better place to be in, not to be saturated by this fear-mongering and propaganda and deceptions. I mean, I don't know how much content in mainstream media is actually true anymore, or even partly true. I think the only thing you can trust is probably football, right? I don't know if you can trust that anymore. But I don't know how people escape it, because you cut yourself off. Because remember, the one thing about the mainstream media is that the one thing it will always do is to actually be consumed by the political and the establishment, because it reflects their opinions and their objectives back to them. So some people, you have to make the decision, which is, well, do I step away from that? Do I then become marginalized myself because I'm not, like you're saying, you're involved in the media? You have to keep informed, and I do like to keep informed, but it's more of an effort on your own. But I think it's more satisfying ultimately on your own to be able to do that and to find out. I've been looking at lots of data and information about coronavirus and COVID for the last few months without any intermediary mainstream media. And I found out a lot that obviously the mainstream media would never dream of telling you. And it's just an effort to do it. And yet I think ultimately it's very rewarding. Switching off the BBC was, after watching it myself for 35 years, was a big thing to do. Yeah. And yet 5 years later, I would never go back to it. It's like giving up smoking. You only realise with a passage of time how dangerous it was for your physical and probably psychological health. And now I would thoroughly recommend it, giving up MSM if anyone can. And you're just in a better place. I'm in a much better place. I think we are, in my family, we're in a much better place.
I think actually funny, David, you mentioned sport there. Yeah, just to pick you up, you mentioned sport. But see, I worry about sport. I'm not a huge sports fan. I'm a Grimsby Town Football Club supporter, so I'm not really into sport. But you know what's bothered me so much about all of this, the last 6 months or whatever, when they started the Premier League and then the professional football back, the artificial crowd noises that they have, that bothers me a bit, because it's distorting reality. These are huge bloody football stadiums, you know, capacity, David, 50, 60, 70,000, whatever it is. There's nobody in them. But yet they've got the crowd and they've got it all synchronized so that when a goal goes in, you hear the cheering noise. And I don't know about you, and I don't know what people on this here stream think, but I mean, I've done both. I've watched football games with my wife where we have the sound on, and I've watched it with the sound off. With the sound off, it's very empty. But then it is very empty. There's no bugger there. But the media are somehow, and it makes me think, David, bread and circuses. Is that not even sport? Sports, bread and circuses now.
Yeah, and it's almost symbolic of a kind of the dishonesty of these times that we're sort of all sitting here pretending. We're being coerced into pretending that reality is something that we don't see or perceive anymore. That we can trick ourselves, we can fool ourselves into believing this. You know, these our own senses are unreliable. You know that we can't see what's happening around us. You know, we're supposed to be surrounded by a I've heard it described as a plague, a killer virus. We're supposed to believe these things, and yet our senses tell us different things. They tell us that we don't think it's nearly as bad as what Matt Hancock believes, what the BBC tells. We don't believe it's nowhere near as bad as that. You know, that you can pretend you're at a football match and pretend there's a crowd there. You know, this is a really strange move, and it's probably, you know, in the future we're talking about AI, artificial intelligence, and if you listen to that Klaus Schwab, aka Mr. Goldfinger, they're leading us into this world where, you know, you don't trust what you see, your own senses. You can't rely on them anymore because you've got this machine, the party, telling you that's wrong. You know, believe this. This is the truth. You know, we'll get some slogans like Orwell does. You know, war is peace, you know, freedom is slavery, protect the NHS, save lives.
Yeah.
You know, you live in this realm of some very weird, paradoxical statements, and it's amazing how people will believe. Orwell knew that people would believe it. He knew that dissenters would be harassed, demonized, like Winston Smith in 1984. He's ultimately, don't forget, people keep talking about 1984, which I've taught it at university. I know it very well. But the thing about 1984 is that the hero of the book, the anti-hero, ends up with a bullet in his head. At the end of that book, he gets a bullet in his head. He's seen through it. He's seen through it. He's been through it. In the end, though, the party crushes him and crushes his spirit and crushes the relationship between him and his girlfriend, Julia. And people are saying, wow, it's 1984. But 1984 is a horrible, horrible ending for humanity. Winston Smith accepts that he's lost. He accepts that 2 + 2 is 5. And he says it in the end, and he's happy to say it. And that's where we are now. They're trying to force us into this weird para-reality that they are creating for us. The media and the government are insisting. They are insisting that that is the real. Your experiences as individuals don't matter because you're just wrong. You're falsifying your own brain. You know, the Marxists did this years ago. False consciousness. That was the cultural Marxist mantra from many, many years ago in the 1930s. Saying, no, you people are too stupid. You're just relying on your own brains. Your own brains are inadequate. This is the reality over here. This is real reality. You can't trust yourselves. Don't trust your own eyes, your nose, your communication, your own brain. Don't trust yourselves. And I think, you know, the football, you mentioned the football thing there. It's almost as if that's the sort of start of this thing, where this weird imposed reality, you're going to have to clap on your doorsteps. You're going to have to take part in these rituals and pretend that there's a football match and that the atmosphere is the same and you're enjoying it with the same vibrancy of standing on the terrace. I used to go and stand on the terraces at Anfield when I was 8 or 9 years old, and I know what it's like to be in that football crowd. And I'm just worried that once you go along with it, then it doesn't end. The fraud will get bigger and bigger and bigger, and you will accept bigger and bigger frauds once you start down that road. And I don't know where that ends. It ends in some very weird para-reality that I don't want to be in.
Yeah, it's like Mark says here in the stream, what's happening now is more like a combination between 1984 and Huxley's Brave New World. I actually would agree with that. I think that's a fair comment as well. But the thing is, in neither scenario, it's not a happy ending. This one does not, you know, you don't walk off into the sunset arm in arm and swirling violins. The reality is, David, that we are having so much stripped away from us. You know, our freedoms are being taken away, things that we enjoy. I've got guys on the stream here I know who, for example, I know Chris, who's on the stream, I can see him, who enjoyed, for example, being able to fly over to Dublin for a weekend and go to the Temple Bar and have a few pints. Like normal human reaction, the thing that we all, that is at the essence of us as human beings. But we've been told by the party, and the media sure as hell have influenced, have made it so amplified it. Yeah, but you can't do that because you have to stay at home. You've got to save lives and protect the NHS. Wash your hands, be good, wear a mask. It's amazing, isn't it? And it makes me wonder, who are the people sending? I mean, somebody's advising government. Do they have these little, 1984 type apparatchiks who are coming up with this mnemonic reprogramming? And David, it's working, isn't it? It's working.
Yes, it's working very successfully. Well, we know that this SAGE committee, there are professors of behavioural psychology on this SAGE committee that are advising the government with their current policy. I mean, one of them is someone called Professor Susan Mitchie, who's got links with the Communist Party and Jeremy Corbyn. I think her daughter was an advisor, got involved in an anti-Semitic row, I think, last year. Someone called Laura Murray, I think. Professors of behavioural psychology, and we remember the briefing last year, which was leaked, which I think said something along, to paraphrase, said people are not scared enough. They're not taking this threat personally. They feel themselves personally threatened. We must scare them. It's out there. So, I mean, if someone tells me there's a river and there's some sharks in it, I'm going to be careful and I'm going to be afraid because I know I can see it and feel it. But if you try to convince me that there's something, that the sharks are in the one that aren't, I'm not going to be afraid. So it's almost that this is manufacturing some kind of synthetic reaction but that's what worries me. It worries me enormously that they feel they have to try to manufacture and manipulate our reactions to this, which makes me wonder about whether it is in any way at all as widespread or as virulent as they say. And I don't think the figures actually support what they're saying. I've been looking at the figures for a while now. But what you're saying, David, is this could only happen with complicit media, which is what we're talking about tonight. That's the only way they could get away with this. Because if the media was actually holding their feet to the fire and actually looking at the facts, not just the facts they want to look at, and this is one of the problems that I have with this, there's a lot of people out there, Conservative MPs especially, who are just cherry-picking the very worst statistics they can possibly find without looking at any of this is a very complex situation here. You can easily scare people by selecting the data that you want. We've seen Wiki and Balance with their PowerPoints doing just that. That leads me to think there's something else going on here. I don't understand why you would be so intent on scaring a population rather than giving positive. You could talk about the people who've been discharged, but notice there's no statistics about people being discharged. They're just telling you 10,000 people in hospital, blah, blah, blah. How many people being discharged? I believe it's actually more being discharged than actually going in, which is a very strange.
Well, actually, David, that's a good point, because we saw the head, Sir Simon, what's his name? Sir Simon Stevens, the head of the NHS England, give us on the Andrew Marr programme, no less, on a Sunday to set the agenda up for the week. Gasp! One person's coming in every 30 seconds to the NHS with COVID. He didn't add that one person is 1 in 36 is leaving the NHS, and one is leaving in 36 seconds. Yeah. And the difference lies in the fact that people are catching COVID in hospitals. Actually, the most dangerous place you can be is in the wonderful NHS hospitals we've got. So if you're right, David, none of this could go anywhere without the collusion and the propagandizing of across the board the British media. And honestly, for quite a while, I kind of despised most journalists. I despise them even more now, because they're scaring people. I can tell you, here in Northern Ireland, David, we have got, like, to the mask wearing rule, for example, and social distancing, we must have 99.999% compliance. I don't comply. I haven't, and I won't comply. But I'm like the 0.1, not 1%. So what they're saying is now, well, we're going to have to get a bit tougher, because we're going to have to crack down harder on all these COVIDiots. And the COVIDiots is basically like 0.001% of the population. You'd think half the people were running around without their masks on and with ignoring social distancing. So it's like the media have created a false reality which entirely then facilitates the government. And the government seems to be ushering something in, to me, David, which is very worrying. You know, again, just a thought. We saw in New Zealand last November, they had camps introduced, camps to put in those who didn't, who tested positive or whatever, but weren't prepared to lock down. And now Germany of all places, have come out with, they're building camps as well. Well, what could possibly go wrong with that? And honestly, David, it wouldn't surprise me in the UK. We'll call them something different, but again, something similar could happen here. And instead of the British media going after them for it, righteously, they will collude and they'll say, well, these COVIDiots are endangering Granny, so it's for their own good that we take them from their families and we stick them, you know, in an updated Butlins camp, but with razor wire so they can't get out. Mind you, if you've been in Butlins, that would be punishment enough. But I mean, it is worrying, isn't it? It is worrying, Dave.
Yeah. I just had flashbacks of an old holiday to Pontins in the 70s then when you said that.
Yeah.
That's like everyone does, really. No, you're right, though. I think that was in Saxony. They're going to, of all places, in Germany. Yeah. I'm going to make this up. As I understand it, though, Dave, I think I read something the other day where it was worded in a really weird, old-fashioned way, which was something like a constable has the right, this is in the UK, if he or she suspects that you are infectious, infecting public health from public health regulations, that constable, although what a constable would be doing, assessing my health status, I don't know. Well, this constable, presumably in conjunction with a doctor from somewhere, could come into the house and then escort you away to somewhere safe. So I think that actually is possible already. But you're right. What I see this leading in the end, it must be something more than just a virus, surely, is a very dark place where, you know, as a facilitator for this great reset, I can only assume it must be something like that. This cannot be incompetency. It can't be. Incompetency may be on the first wave, and then people would have then retrospectively analysed the mistakes made, and you wouldn't make the same mistake again. But when you go to lockdown 2, lockdown 3, and they're talking, I'm sure there's going to be a lockdown next year as well. I'm absolutely certain about that, because I'm also absolutely certain that they have a plan, which is to get everybody vaccinated with this messenger RNA gene therapy, which they are calling a vaccine. Yep. And the research I've been doing, the people I've been speaking to, this has been developed from cancer therapy, and it's a gene therapy. So it's wrong to call it a vaccine. So even that's a lie. It's not a traditional vaccine as we understand it. Measles, when you're a child and you have the little tiny concentration or a dead virus pumped into your arm, and then there was an immune response. This is not that. So even to call it a vaccine is misleading, highly misleading. So you have to ask yourself the question: why does this government want to mislead us? Why is it being so punitive and authoritarian? And why has it? And my suspicion is that from day one, mass vaccination has been the ultimate goal. Why would you want to do that? I just don't understand why you would want to inject the population with this massively expensive, massively bureaucratic, and totally impractical solution to a relatively small problem that could have been dealt with much more efficaciously with sensible reactions to it. So that leads me to think, I know I've heard people saying that this is the start of this 2020 to 2030 agenda, whereby in conjunction, I don't know if people know this, but the British government have signed a white paper to work with the World Economic Forum. I mean, this is the British government working with an unelected quango of crackpot German economists, Marxist economists in Germany. So I can only assume that somehow this mass vaccination program has got something to do with the loss of liberty, a long-term plan, which involves the population living totally. That's what they're saying. They're saying you're going to live completely differently. You know, we're going to be, David, a few years from now, we could be eating insects for dinner, not allowed to leave our smart cities, and all riding bicycles, green bicycles. I think that's where it's heading. To Boris Johnson is completely sold on. Just listen to, read his tweets. Build back better.
Oh, I know.
Every single build back better. Green.
Yeah.
I mean, the far left. I mean, I didn't vote. I don't think people who voted Conservative voted for Caroline Lucas. Well, that's what they've got.
That's what they've got. Yeah, and that's a fact, David. I was invited by Russia Today. They asked me last week would I come on and talk about bugs in the diet. I said no. There's no way I'm going to come on and talk about bugs in the diet, because even to do that would actually help normalize such absolute lunacy. But there is I saw a comment, David. I want to Nick Heath says this was fine until David Sedgwick became an anti-vaxxer. No, I suspect, Nick, that David Sedgwick, rather like David Vance, I believe that vaccines play a very important role in our lives. I've had loads of vaccines, by the way, over the years, traveling here, traveling there. Thoroughly recommend them. The thing is that it is perfectly reasonable, Nick, to question the different, be it the Pfizer one, be it the Moderna one, which big questions are arising in it, by the way, David, and not least AstraZeneca. You're not an anti-vaxxer if you question, Nick, the COVID-19, the speed line, the timeline on it. I've told people before, I've worked with friends in pharmaceutical over the years, over many years. I know and I fully understand the timelines, David, and getting an efficacious, safe drug. And I mean, the SARS one arose in 2002, 2003. 17, 18 years on. They couldn't come up with one for it. But magically, this one has been conjured up in less than 8 months. So, Nick, I don't think. Well, David, I don't want to talk for you. You can respond yourself. But just so you know, Nick, that's my view on it. I question it. I want to see people kept well. But anti-vaxxer, that's deploying the language of the fake news media. David Sedgwick.
Well, have you got some BBC trolls on here? I mean, that's just the usual lazy argument of someone who's uninformed and ignorant, isn't it? I mean, I've had my vaccinations. My family have had vaccinations when we were younger. We've had all the usual standard vaccinations. This is a messenger RNA gene therapy. What was the fella called? Whoever you are there. So I'm not an anti-vaxxer, although that's the easiest and laziest way, I suppose, you can deal with someone who has got more knowledge than you have. I suppose that's the classic way. But this particular company, Pfizer, I mean, I'd say to that chap who was just there, that the UK were the first country very proudly to pass the Pfizer vaccine, weren't they, in early December?
Yeah.
I think they. Well, I would just say to anyone, have a look at the Pfizer rap sheet. That company, the world's biggest pharmaceutical, who've made this vaccine. And don't forget now, we are seeing some reactions in places like Norway and Germany. We're seeing people dying, older people, following this Pfizer vaccine. So that's the first thing. I think it's an individual decision.
Yeah.
I think this thing about anti-vax is just it's a very lazy argument. I mean, I would say to people, have a look at Pfizer and have a look at the lawsuits against Pfizer, for example, over the years. That's one consideration. I mean, they've paid out billions of dollars for misleading. They've misled people about the product. Cerebrex, I think, was a painkiller way back about 10 years ago. They had to pay nearly $1 billion in lawsuits because of that, because the Cerebrex, which was supposed to be an anti-arthritic painkiller, actually caused gastrointestinal bleeding and cardiovascular issues. So you've got to be careful, and you have to do your own research. And I've got no problem with people taking a vaccine to that person. I have no problem with you taking that vaccine or your family taking that vaccine. I've got an immune system, and I prefer to keep my own health, my own business. And for him to come out of anti-vax, what a lazy, sloppy thing to say.
Well, moving on from that one, bearing in mind, David, that our good friends at YouTube and Facebook are sensitive in some of these topics. So you want to talk about MSM censorship, Facebook and YouTube are far behind them. Celebrities. The media have played a blinder again, getting celebrities. You just pick your, sort of celebrity-starved B-lister, and all of a sudden they're now leading the anti-jab crusade. Have you seen them? I mean, it makes me smile, actually, because it's so ridiculous. But again, it's how it all works, isn't it? Celebrity works with media, works with government, boom. And unfortunately, too many sheep watch and they go, yeah, well, I mean, Gemma from oh God knows, from one of these Love Island type programs or whatever. She's saying we should get the vaccine. She's saying we need to do what Boris says. So it's the coalescence of everything that's awful to my mind, and yet that's exactly what it is at the moment, though.
It's kind of like, well, I sometimes call it the golden circle. You have to adopt the majority groupthink opinion, even if you're a celebrity on a reality TV show. That could seriously affect your future career. And that's where we are at the moment. And there's people actually, quite a lot of people approve of that. But like we said, one day could easily turn against you. And I think if people are just going along with it, I can understand why they do it, of course, because if you're on TV and you've got a career on TV, you go against the narrative, and that's the end of it. You'll disappear. You're finished. Your career is finished. Whether it's morally correct to do that as an individual, to go along with that, that's up to the individual. But it tells you the state of our society, Dave, where people are prepared to actually go along with something, even if they don't agree with it, purely to keep their job, their income, their livelihood. And that's a very desperately sad position for any society to be in. What that tells you is there's a powerful group that is controlling the opinion of those people through threat, intimidation, effectively money. It comes down to power and money. So you have the very top are setting that agenda, and you either go along with that agenda or you lose your career. I mean, what a society, what a time to live. 2021, and we're down to that. This is medieval time. It's almost medievalism. It's almost as if the Enlightenment never happened. You can't have an opinion. You've got to go back to the old feudal system where the king and the court of the king tell you, the peasants, what to think. And that's it. And we don't want to hear anything else. Are we in 2021 or are we in 1321? Think about that for a moment. And David, the thing that really makes me laugh is that these people who are implementing this system, and there's a lot of them, people I used to work with in academia are some of the worst conformists. These are the people that will sort of read 1984 unironically, and they'll look at a text like that and they'll think, that's a terrible society. Imagine living in a society like that, top-down, authoritarian, as they're doing exactly the same thing. They don't recognize themselves. All these academics, bureaucrats, technocrats, who Orwell was saying, be careful. These people are seriously dangerous. These are the people who read 1984 and fail to recognize themselves or their own behavior in that text, who are happily creating exactly the thing that he said, make sure you never get to this point in society.
Well, you see, Chris Davis, he makes the point here, David. He says Goebbels would be proud of government propaganda. And of course, he's right, David, because back in the day when Goebbels and that bunch of thugs were gaining power, they used propaganda very effectively. But back then, the media wasn't omnipresent, was it? The media, they didn't have the internet back in the 30s. God only knows what would have happened had they had the internet. But what we have is, we thought we had a free internet for freedom of expression, but we know, and we've seen, when the 45th United States president is taken down by the likes of Twitter, and that's cheered to the rafters by all the other big tech. We know that we've got a means, David, to spread propaganda in a way that, as Chris says, Goebbels would only have dreamed of. We've got the means to do it now, and the ability then to fight back is taken away because you're removed. You are non-person. I was non-person. Katie Hopkins, Tommy Robinson, Stephen Molyneux, all the people I like and I've liked in social media. We were all wiped away because we say the wrong things. So it it's Orwellian on steroids, isn't it? Really, the combination of propaganda and censorship. It's just boom, and it's where it leads, David. Where does this end?
Well, yeah, and you know, well, I think we're almost there. I think that the greatest disappointment has been that we thought that technology was going to set us free, was going to allow us to express ourselves, and it's actually to communicate effectively and openly and freely. It's actually done the opposite. In fact, the more we get sucked into this technological world, the less free we become. I don't. I mean, I'm a bit of a throwback in a way that I don't have a television, and I've told you I don't have a television license. I don't have a mobile phone. I don't use a microwave oven. You know, with me, it's a rejection of all this technology, because I just believe that technology started off in a benevolent sense, that it was going to help the world. But you can see what it's doing. It's actually being inverted now, and it's actually becoming a tool of control. And I think the more that we get dragged into technology, the more our lives become dependent, every aspect of our life. And you said, where's it going to lead? And I think where it leads, David, is that every aspect of our life, even in ways we don't know now, will be controlled by chips and technology. And that means less freedom, less human freedom. And that's where it's going. You look at people like Elon Musk and people like that developing these systems and really into AI. That means at the end of the day that our every movement will be recorded. Our thoughts will be recorded, all according to the thought police. And people thought, well, that's absolutely mental. Okay, we understand an authoritarian state. But come on, police being able to police your thoughts. That's where it goes. And the more technological we become, the less freedom we get, which was the opposite of what most people thought technology would lead to in the end. They thought it would lead to freedom. It's leading to, ultimately, I think, slavery.
Yeah, you're dead right, David. That is one of the huge ironies on it. A thing that we thought would set us free will ensure that we stay imprisoned, and even worse, many people will thank the technology for the imprisoning them. I mean, I have this nightmare vision of generations of young kids, school-age kids, sitting in front of sitting at home. They don't have to go to school anymore. There's no need for school. School's irrelevant. The BBC will do the education. And could you imagine the damage, but also the impacts of that? You know, the cultivation of anti-British hatred, anti-British history, everything you could but imagine. And yet, you can see it's beginning to happen. You know, the teaching unions don't want people to necessarily go back in the classroom, or lecturers to go back to uni. So it's like we're withdrawing into a technologically enabled prison, and it's called our home.
Yes. And I think that's some kind of weird fantasy for some of the most extreme authoritarians. Is they envisage a world where maybe one day to go outside would call you some kind of eco-terrorist. You've gone outside your own house. Okay, sorry, there's going to be a helicopter saying, sorry, you're an eco-terrorist. You're polluting the atmosphere with your chocolates or something like that. Get inside, go and watch the big telly screen from BBC Centre, and Deliveroo will come around with your insect dinner later on and deliver it to you. There's no need for you to go out. Don't go to the shopping. Don't go shopping. We'll give you a nice, tasty, nutritious meal of locust and larvae. We'll deliver that straight to your door. No need for you to go out at all. We'll give you some virtual entertainment. We'll put a virtual swimming pool on your living room wall, and you can put your swimming trunks on and pretend you're going for a swim. This is where it goes, David. It goes to a very, very dark place.
You touched on a real sore point for me, David, because I've been swimming daily for a long time, because it's a really good way to keep fit, low impact, good cardiovascular. And of course, the swimming pool that I go to has been closed pretty much now since last March. So isn't it strange that, funny how no journalist has ever asked the question, so to keep healthy, you need a good immune system. A good immune system is sustained by going out, getting exercise, fresh air, could be going to the gym, going swimming like me. It could be just sitting out in your back garden, going out and talking to people, getting the sort of the endorphin hit of fellow humanity. But that's all been taken, and the media loves it. So, David, what do you say?
There's some pretty sick people around. And you sort of think to yourself, okay, you're a journalist working for the BBC or Daily Mail or something like that. You've got children, haven't you? Or you must know children. Where do you think? Yeah, but where do the people who are facilitating? I call them enablers, from the BBC to the mainstream media to these academics who are all plugged into this kind of consensus opinion. And I've worked in university, David, and I can tell you there's nothing worse than a consensus opinion. Everybody where I used to work shared pretty much the same consensus. And I remember asking my colleagues years ago, because I'd written some papers about the EU, and I realised what a dangerous institution it was. But I can tell you, when I asked my colleagues why they're going to vote for the EU, why were they pro-EU, they couldn't tell me. But what they did tell me was, well, because that's what we do. People like us, the educated, we are naturally EU supporters. They couldn't give me any reason. They didn't know anything about the EU, how it worked or operated, or the democratic deficiencies that I was pointing out. So that shows you that once these academics, these so-called enlightened intelligentsia, hook into a certain meme, they are incredibly resistant to anything. And we're seeing this with COVID now. And it's almost as if there's sort of an establishment pride, which is basically, and I've seen this amongst academics where I used to be, is basically, we can't be proven wrong. So once we've decided something is, there's no way we can then retract and say, oh, sorry, look, we got it wrong. The professor, blah, blah, got it wrong, etc. The BBC got it wrong. No, we can never do that, because that would show that we're not that intelligent after all. We don't really know. And actually, common sense, people without qualifications actually know better than us. And we can't simply allow that. So with the COVID thing, what you can see is they've gone so far down this road now. There are never, ever, where does that lead? Because they're never going to go back and say, do you know something? We got it wrong. Actually, the people who were less qualified were actually pretty much on the money here, and they were more sensible than we were, the alleged experts. And that's one of the problems, this kind of establishment pride and general, this consensus opinion. I've seen it. It is hugely dangerous. It's a sort of BBC I've written about them in my book there, the BBC sort of like narratives. They never change. The working class are racist. End of story. You'll never convince us otherwise. We know it to be a fact. And they're dangerous. They're dangerous opinions to have.
Well, they are. But the other thing is, though, David, this strata of society that you're talking about, the sort of the elitist middle classes, they're the people who, not just the media love lockdown, but they love lockdown because most of them are sitting on their fat backsides on full salary. If their furlough is being topped up, their pensions are safe, their tenure is safe, they lose nothing. It's the working class men and women of this country, especially those, David, you mentioned younger people, young folks maybe rely on working in a pub or working in a restaurant or cafe. Those are the people who are going to be finished by this. Their jobs, have already, lots of them have gone. So it's a smug intelligentsia, predominantly public sector, I have to say, who love it. And the public sector is the state. So the state's getting bigger, empowering itself. It's smashing the private sector apart from the bits of it that it wants. And I'll tell you where I think it ends. I think this leads to China. We become a veritable Western European variant of China, where people are tracked and traced, where you've got your social mobility score, David, where if you argue against the state, you vanish, or you, metaphorically. All those things, and I think that's where I see us going there. And I can't. The only way I see it being stopped, David, is because the media won't stop this. It's if people waking up, and I think that people are very much, sadly, 10 months on into this, sound asleep, snoring. And if they wake up, it's really hard to know where it goes.
I don't see any signs that there's going to be any kind of insurrection on any kind of appreciable scale. And I think it's basically people are, like you said, there's a lot of people who are on the public sector payroll. Look at teachers. Will teachers ever want to go back to work after? How can you send them back to work after almost perhaps a year off? That's going to be virtually impossible. Look how they're resisting it already, these teaching unions. And like you said, the people who are really affected by this are going to be the sort of lower working class. They're not going to have these these jobs come back into. But I think that's probably part of this idea of mechanization. You don't need people working anymore. I mean, don't look at a place like Amazon. They've got pretty much mechanization all the way through that supply chain now. I think it's just the drivers. So, and you said yes. So where does that end? You're going to have people who are without money, without property. I'm quite happy. I know for sure that one day private property is abolishing of private property is going to be a long-term aim of some of these people, definitely, because you take away as much control away from people, much autonomy in their life as possible. You end up like communist China, with people living in high-rise flats, not owning anything, unable to travel any distances. Look at Boris Johnson; he's going to get rid of petrol and diesel. They want to push sort of green transport, maybe weird communist-style buses. You can, after you've eaten your insects in the morning, you can get on a sort of communist-style bus, a 1940s East German bus or something. Restrict your travel into the countryside, make that sacrosanct. You have a special pass to go to the countryside. You're right. This is going to a place where, but you know what, Dave? The middle classes who are facilitating this, who think it's all jolly fun, jolly good stuff down there in the BBC. I take them as the archetypal metropolitan liberal. I wonder if they ever think what it's really going to be like. You know, they're banging the drum at the moment. They're looking forward to it, crushing the working class along the way because they despise the working class. What kind of world do they think it's going to be for their children, their grandchildren? I don't think for a moment any of them are looking long term. I think this is purely short term, and I think a lot of it is driven by anger towards the Brexit. I think there's a kind of a revenge mission here on the Brexiteers who were allegedly low-class voters. So let's really rack it up this lockdown. Let's punish them as much as possible, because they know who's being punished by lockdown: working class people more than anyone else, as you rightly pointed out. And in the end, it's not going to work out for any of them. So I don't. I think the average BBC pundit there, really happy at the moment. What kind of society do they think that's going to be in the end? A mass surveillance society without liberty. You can't just go fishing. You can't take your son and your daughter out fishing or to the fairground. What are the kind of do these BBC really want that? I don't think, probably, if you ask them honestly, I think most of them wouldn't want that. But they're locked in. Like I said to you, they're locked into this groupthink consensus. I mean, how do you break that? I don't know how.
Yeah,
I'm not very optimistic.
Yeah, it's always difficult, David, to end these things on a cheery note. However, I would add that by way of light comedy and a break from the sort of the negativity of COVID, Joe Biden gets inaugurated tomorrow, so that should be good fun, everybody. So I'm sure you'll be glued in to watch it. I've got a bet on to see. I reckon he'll forget to turn up. He'll just call it a lid. He'll decide. He'll have forgotten about it. So maybe, so if that happens, I'm going to be really in the money. But that, if it doesn't, we've got that to look forward to tomorrow. I see most of the American military are in Washington. I heard it. This will make you laugh, David. Apparently, there's more military in Washington for this inauguration tomorrow than there was in 1851, when America was in the middle of a civil war. Straight, funny old world, isn't it?
Yes, I don't know. I really don't know what they're expecting tomorrow. Well, I think partly it's because they don't want. They did that. The BBC have used it several times. The Obama 28 inauguration picture down Washington Mall compared to the Trump one, where they said, "Look, no one turned up for the Trump one." They were absolutely bricking it, weren't they? Because they knew literally nobody was going to turn up for the Biden one, and then everyone would be comparing the Trump one, which they said nobody turned up for, with the Biden one, which literally nobody was going to turn up for. So they've managed to circumvent that, haven't they?
Well, they have indeed. But listen, David, because we had those technical problems, which, by the way, I think I'm the guy who caused it. So my apologies, David. But I'm sorry, folks. But I think everything worked out in the end. That echo mysteriously vanished. I understand, as quickly as it came. So, David, it's a real pleasure to have you back in the stream. Thank you very much for taking an hour out of your time and coming here and talking to us. And I hope everyone enjoyed that. Folks, I will be back tomorrow night on Open Dialogus. If you follow me over there, we've got a group discussion going on what else? The US election. And then on Thursday night, I'm back here on this channel, and I've got my US longtime colleague, the city troll. David, I've always I was very glad to get off Twitter, because the hate sent my way from trolls was almost unbearable at times. Just the sheer stupidity, they're saying the sheer intellectual lightweight. But City Troll is a longtime friend of mine. He's an American, lives in Pennsylvania, comes from a family of law enforcers, solid Trump-supporting guy. So I've got him coming on the stream, folks, on Thursday night. So I invite you to join me tomorrow night, Thursday night, and we'll see what I want to do on Friday. But in the meantime, look, that's it from me. Thanks again to David Sedgwick. If you should check out David's books to get a really detailed forensic examination, David, of the sheer horror show that is the likes of the BBC. But as I said, that's it from me, and catch up with you folks hopefully tomorrow night. See you then. Bye for now.